keynote speaker and the visionary behind the world's first comprehensive well-being curriculum and holistic wellness improvement system. Her story is marked by resilience and determination. Joyce's personal health struggles laid the foundation for a career that intertwines conflict management, coaching, and well-being. Joyce's innovative approach is a direct result of her efforts to navigate and harmonize her own health and professional aspirations. Some of Joyce's innovations can be experienced on her What's Happening at Work podcast show and the annual Global Workplace Wellness Summit. Joyce is also a frequent TV guest, expert, and the author of 6 books. Joyce's journey from overcoming personal health challenges to leading a revolution in workplace well-being is not just inspiring, but also a testament to her resilience. Please welcome Joyce.
Thanks, Alana. So I understand that you guys have just been revived, right? So I'm not going to see anybody dozing off, because guess what? They put me on the last. That means I have to keep you awake. How many of you have baby pictures? Baby pictures of yourself. How many of you have your parents have shown you what you look like when you were a baby? With a picture. How many of you don't have any? Oh, I have company. Yeah, I don't have any baby pictures either. I'm like, what happened? Did you go to war with the camera? Like, why couldn't you wait until after I was born to do that? So I tell you this because one of the things we know is that diversity is very important in everything we do. We've learned that, and we're continuing to learn that. And one of the things that I do in my work is look at how can we be more inclusive in everything we do. And today we had such a really great conference. We've heard so many different topics, so many different ways on implementing your benefits program and keeping it inclusive. For myself, in my work, I have been part of EAP programs with the federal government actually still on, work through Health Canada, EAP, SOS, ICMS, if you're familiar with any of those lingo. And also I've done some EAP work with some of our aerospace organizations as well. And it's important because many times employees will approach me and say, can I have your services? And I'm like, no, we are not covered by your benefit program. And I know that's important, and those are some of the things we talked about today. So what I want to do in our time together is talk a little bit about the future of work and why inclusiveness is important when we look at inclusive wellness. And I heard some talk about having those employee programs for employees so that they can actually have their health spend benefits and how that's important. I'm going to talk a little bit about rethinking mental health. And I'm going to talk about identifying and mitigating risks so that we can be more inclusive in our wellness. Now, you may ask, how did Joyce came to be doing this work? I'm a conflict analyst. And so I do systems work. I look at the organizational system and I help to resolve big conflicts. The more protracted, the more excited I become. And over the years, I've been doing this for 27 years. I'm very young. I started very young. And I've been doing this for a number of years, and some of the things that I've seen is that the employees who are challenged, who are not doing well, tend to have more conflicts. And so this has got me galvanized into doing some work and some research and came up with a number of frameworks. And I'll share a couple with you and tell you why I think it's important, and some of the things we talk about, we can put it all in a nutshell and walk away today knowing what we talked about. So it's important for us to think about the future of work. Why? Why is the future of work important? I like when people talk back to me, actually. future is here and it's continuing to evolve, right? Our children are the future, we were told. And as our kids grow, we look to ensure that they have a good future. But what happens when we are not ready? What did we notice happen? Actually, during the pandemic, we had some organizations that we do a lot of corporate training, and they would, we have no way to go online, and so we had to accommodate just like most trainers do. But what we find were some organizations, they had to run around behind computers for their employees because they needed people to move from the desktop at work to home. So the future of work, we've had a lot of time to pivot with COVID. We have learned a lot about ourselves. We've become more resilient. And now it's time for us to look at why we need to move from wellness to more inclusiveness and well-being. And that's key because a lot of the work and the research we're seeing is telling us that the next generation doesn't have the tolerance and patience that we do. They are not going to put up with a lot of the things that we've done. So I have a question. How many of you, if you could think back, when was the first time you started equating a good life with your job, like work and life? Just think back. 5, 6, Actually, most of us can't even recall when we started because our society has socialized us to think that work will make our life better, right? When you hear someone is doing well with this person, you ask, what do they do, right? You see someone, you wonder, what do they do? We actually identify ourselves by what we do. So what happens when you go to work and it doesn't make your life better? You get angry, disillusioned, depressed, burnt out, disconnected, and you end up in a lot of conflicts. Then I get to see you. So one of the things that we've done at Interpersonal Wellness Services is work with our clients over the last 27 years, and we're looking at, let us take a look at moving from just talking about wellness to creating a more inclusive, multidimensional approach to well-being so that employees are not just participating in wellness activities, but they are moving to well-being. They are learning things at work that they can take back home. And I'll share some more for you because well-being needs to be that whole person approach, where wellness are activities we can do that doesn't necessarily interrelate or interconnect. So we have people doing isolated activities towards wellness, but there isn't that correlation, there isn't that integrated aspect of it. Yet humans are very integrated. Our whole person. When you hire someone, they come to work with their whole self, including their baggage. So it doesn't matter what's going on in my life. And I love when we were looking at the keynote this morning and she did the picture of the woman who had this beautiful background and then chaos was happening. We all have that. We bring our baggage to our work. And some of us are better equipped than others to hide it or to keep it in the background. Sometimes we're not able to do that. And that's when we need help. And that's when our benefits come in. They're supposed to support us and help us to live the good life. And work is supposed to help us and equip us to live the good life. Because otherwise we get disillusioned. Wellness is supposed to propel us to the path of well-being, to be healthy, to be comfortable, to be fulfilled, to be happy, to be thriving. That's what we all want. But why is it so hard? Why is it so difficult? Why are we struggling to thrive? It's our birthright. We're humans. We're supposed to thrive. But yet it's a struggle. And wellness programs have been in organizations organizations for decades. And the studies show that we have a 20% uptake. 20% of the employees participate in their wellness programs. And the last time we checked, it wasn't that much more people who are actually utilizing the employee assistance and family benefits. So you ask yourself, why? What's the disconnect? I mean, you're paying, right? Money comes from your paycheck every bi-weekly, goes into this. And the employees, they say to me, Joyce, I don't know. I just don't want to go. And we look at thriving at work as something we need to do. Because I often say to my employees that employees take more than the paperclip home. They take the things they learn at work home to their families. And I will tell you, in the 27 years that I have been teaching adults in organizations, they will say, Joyce, can I take this home? I was working with leaders through Manitoba government. We do a leadership program for the leaders. And leaders, one guy stood up and he said, you know, Joyce, I just want to let you know that what you've been teaching us, I know it's for our employees, but I have been taking it home. I'm using it with my sons. I've been telling my teenagers, and he felt sort of like embarrassed saying it. So I asked, I said, how many of you here in the room are doing the same thing? Put your hand up. And everybody put their hand up. And I said, look around, you're not alone. We are supposed to learn at work and take the good things home, not the bad things. And many employees do. There was this mother who went home on maternity leave. And she had a newborn and she had a 5-year-old, and she came in like we used to do to the office with the baby so everybody could see the baby, and she had the 5-year-old, and then her boss showed up and she said, oh, Johnny, this is my boss son. And he's like, Mommy, is that the asshole you're talking about? And so we're supposed to take the good things home as well, right? But we end up taking more bad things home. And so we laugh, but it's true, because we go home to the dinner table, and what do? We share our day. This is what happened at work. I tell you, that man was, right, and you go on. And guess what? Our kids are listening. And they're thinking, well, I thought work was supposed to be fun. Doesn't sound fun, right? So I am not going to go through all my slides, because I think it's sad to have you at the end of the day going through all these slides. You've got a copy, I heard. So I'm just going to go through some of the pieces that I want to pull out and highlight with us today. I came up with the 9-dimensional piece because I wanted to show how interconnected my clients were. I was seeing some very disconnected, unhappy, grumbling people were coming to my office, and they were coming to work with me, and they were not attuned to the rest of themselves. They were disconnected as people. And I started to get them to start looking at the different elements of their lives. The spiritual side, the emotional side, the social side. Looking at themselves as whole people. Recognizes that occupation is just one element of your life. And so what happens to you in other areas of your life will creep into. It's like a puzzle. Humans, we are like a puzzle. When one aspect of our life is not doing well, it impacts others. And it flows into all those other areas. And so through the time that I've been teaching this, I come to it through the lenses of a conflict analyst. And so I see people through the interpersonal dynamics, the interpersonal lens. And I would get called from the organizations and they would say, Joyce, we want you to work with Harry. And I said, oh, what's wrong with Harry? Well, Harry has been a really good employee. He's one of the leaders. He's been with us for 20-something years, but he went off on a trip to the States with a colleague, and now she filed sexual harassment. And I'm like, has this happened before? No, but we know you can help Harry. Okay. Harry comes down, and Harry's mad. I have been so faithful to that organization. I have done so much for them. I have been a good employee. And now without any proof, I'm being mistreated, I'm being misaligned, there is no proof. It's her words against his words. And so my client says, Joyce, please work with Harry. We want to keep Harry. We want to save Harry. Harry's, he's worked with us for a long time. We don't want to dismiss him, but we want him to become aware of what went wrong and how we can change those behaviors for the future. When I work with Harry, I put Harry through our whole person wellness assessment, to start looking at his life as interconnected in all the different parts of his life and what makes Harry Harry. And in this scenario, Harry recognizes that, you know what, I have been kind of lonely lately. And Harry has a wife, and she's perfectly fine. But I've just been kind of lonely, Joyce. I haven't been really talking or sharing my feelings because Harry's a middle-aged man, and men don't talk about their feelings, right? It's not a manly thing to do. So Harry's conversation wasn't meant to be sexual. He just felt that it was a time, that in a space, that he was with this colleague, and he just shared certain things, and she, from her own trauma, her own issue, decided that it was out of line. So what did we do with Harry? Working with Harry is about creating awareness that you're a whole person, Harry, and if you don't deal with those issues, all of us have some level of trauma. If you don't deal with those issues, they will come out in the wrong place and at the wrong time, and your interpersonal dynamics is what people judge you by. Right? It doesn't matter how popular you are, you could do one thing, my daughter calls it, you could do one career suicide act, right? That could impact your career. So I want us to talk a little bit. I have put together, I think we have a poll. And if you can scan, I know they ask you to put away your phone, but you have permission to take it out for this. Everyone got it? No question? All right. Okay. So what is most essential as an inclusive workplace culture? Healthy eating, good leadership relationships, or employee buy-in? As you can see here, our numbers are growing, but it's going more towards the leadership, right? How many of you are surprised by that? Actually, the research came out and said that our leaders have more influence on our mental health than our spouse, because we spend more time in our waking hours with them. So it is not an accident. And where I sit from the place of interpersonal, these are the lenses from which I use to see what's happening in the organization and how our clients. Because I work with big organizations with multi-departments, multi-organizations, multi-level conflict and issues, we get to get a deeper scope of what's going on in people's action at work. So you could be eating healthy, right? And most of us should, we'll talk about that. And you could be going for your run and your exercise and your workout and your meditation, but your boss can affect your mental health, your relationship with your boss. That's why it's so important for us to talk about the relational aspect. And one of the reasons why thank you, by the way, for participating in the poll. We have one more, and we will do that one. I'm going to skip through some of the slides, as I said. Human well-being has never been more critically low. we are at a desperate state of well-being. Actually, Gallup poll research said that over the last 20 years, we've had a seven-point gap in people's well-being, because while some people have done extremely well, there are more people who are not doing well than ever before. And there are a number of factors, right? We see many different things that are happening in our society, and post-COVID, I remember 20 years ago, I was doing workshops in organizations. I said, World Health Organization said that by 2020, depression will be the highest cause of workplace disability. And everybody just tuned me out, because we didn't really know what that meant. It really wasn't. It was just a research, and it was a prediction of the trends of where we're going. That was before COVID. Things have changed completely. So we are at a critical stage in our well-being, and we have many different factors. Many people who come to the workplace are living in solo homes, like there are living alone, isolation at home. Research says if you are living in a happy relationship, you have a longer lifespan, you have a healthier lifestyle, you have a healthier life, and you have more longevity, whereas those who live alone. So some of the other things that they're showing is loneliness. Like, you don't have to be living alone to be lonely, by the way. You could be married and lonely. So when I told you earlier about the story of the client who got accused of sexual harassment, he had a wife and they had a relationship, and somehow he found himself drifting away in the relationship, becoming more lonely, more isolated, and not communicating. So one of the things that I've done in actually opening out the research, and I want to spend most of my time actually. This is the Gallup poll research, and I just want to go through that for a little bit before I move to the other slide where we're going to look at. It looks like the workers most likely to stay, they're really the next generation. We talk about the Gen Zs, 4-day work week, and they're looking for more flexibility, less time crunched at work, and you have the research so you can go through it. So work is changing, but let me spend more time with you telling you why I think we should rethink mental health. Because we have less nutrition in our food, we have more time spent in social media, more time spent in other activities than we did before. Just imagine, in 100 years ago, we had the same DNA that we have now. Our forefathers were hunters and gatherers. The same DNA. Don't forget, our DNA hasn't changed. We had the same DNA, we were working together. 3 or 4 generations of working together, there was support. At the end of the day, everybody went out to work early in the morning, they came back together, they ate together, they talked together. Right? See how foreign that is to our concept? Right? But we have the same DNA strand. Nothing has changed physically, except we've added more stress to our life. So we become nuclear family, one person households, we become more disenfranchised from the family community. Now, what was the benefit of having those family members? When there's a problem, there was somebody to talk to. Actually, we had fewer problems because it was the old grandma, somebody who tell you, don't do that, this will happen, right? Advice, right? The coach, that's why we need coaches now, because we don't have anybody to tell us how to stay away from trouble. So we have more stresses, we're more likely to deviate from the norm and try new things, which is good. I'm all for adventure, but we are living those isolated lives. We have far less family integration in our life. So when things happen in our lives, we have nobody to fall back on. We have very little resources. So we are more stretched. We spend far more time working with people we don't know, right? Because in the familial system, we know everybody. And one of the pieces we teach in interpersonal is that humans like to be with people who know, like, and trust them. It gives us a sense of safety. Our brain has to do less work. So look at the difference to where we are right now. We spend a lot of times with people we don't know. We have to work to develop those relationships. Sometimes it's very stressful. We go into work with bosses that probably have different value system than we do. And we're working with coworkers that have different values, so there's more interpersonal tussles, more tension. We're more worried about our reputation. I could go on, but you can see the picture why our mental health is more stretched. We have more issues occurring in our lives. We have long commutes. Some of us have longer commutes to work. We have stresses in traffic. We have different issues with our children because our children are going to daycare with strangers. We don't have a family unit where the children are taken care of by the elders anymore. So over the years, we've stretched and stretched and stretched the same DNA strand. Remember, we started, this is the same DNA strand that we're putting 100 times more stress. And we haven't even talked about society yet, right? We now have that thing called television. And not only that, now we have smartphone. We can get the news anywhere we want to. Don't forget, back then, if somebody died in England, we didn't know for a year or 6 months. What happens when there's a volcano somewhere? How long do we know? Does it take before we find out? Right? And our brain doesn't know the difference that is happening in Guatemala, or is happening in a different part of the world, or is happening right in our neighborhood, because the world is a village. We become. And so our stresses that we've added to our lives is significantly more. That is why it is so important for us to learn and create our own wellness system. That's why when you're looking at your benefits program, you have to think whole person. Because people are stretched very thin. So I'm going to move on to looking at just rethinking that whole idea of mental health is very, very important because our lives have been changed so much. That's why we need to identify those risks very early so we can address them, mitigate them, and manage our mental and well-being. This model came up, and this is the signature model of my work, and there aren't too many elements in it right now, so hopefully you can see from the back. And the research I have done, and in my work, I've come up with an assumption that humans are multidimensional and interconnected in all the parts. And the more we deny that, the more at risk we become. The more at risk we become to losing grasp and to maintaining our mental health. When I started doing this work, I was very nervous because here was I, a little rock one, going into corporations and telling them they need to have spiritual wellness in their organization. I was shaking. I was like, I'm sure they won't do any work for me anymore. But you know what? We do a lot more work in that realm. It's not necessarily called that way because one of the elements in the spiritual wellness dimension, and this doesn't show here because we only have 2. I didn't want it to be too busy for you, but there are 20 key life areas in each of these dimensions. So each in spiritual, there are 20 elements that we look at. One of them is self-esteem. And we do a lot of work around the professional self-esteem of employees, and we teach that workshop, and they tell us that their self-esteem, their sense of self-worth, their sense of purpose and meaning is very important to them. And when we go into work and we're disconnected and we're isolated and work doesn't mean anything to us, work doesn't connect with our soul, we become disillusioned. We lose meaning and purpose. That is why our wellness programs need to be inclusive of the whole person. A couple years ago, I was invited to do a pilot study, pilot project with Miami University in Ohio. They found some funding, and they were going to create staff wellness programs in 75 schools. And I was doing a keynote and talking about how important it is to be thinking of wellness as interconnected, and they saw the model and invited me to be part of that study. And one of the things that we noticed is the teachers were saying, we spend so much time caring for others, and for the first time we're feeling that people care about us. That our organization sees us as whole people, not just the caregivers of the children, but that they're now taking care of our needs. And I have been teaching this in organizations since 2006. And every time we have a full assessment behind this, so employees can actually assess how well they're doing in each of the dimensions, and they get a quantifiable number. And we started doing it with a worksheet, and now it's electronic as an instrument, AI and everything. It's fun. And one of the things they tell us is, you think they care enough about me as a person? Are you sure my organization wants me to work on myself? And it's interesting to see how people soften. I have big burly guys come into my office and like, Joyce, are you sure? They want you to be working with me about my whole stuff? It's like, yeah. Are you sure my organization saw that? And it just, maybe they care, maybe they care. It just changes because all of us yearning inside for people to care about us, especially work, because we've been socialized from the beginning of our life to think that having a good job meant having a good life. And when we show up at work and we're disconnected and work doesn't have any meaning and we're not connected to what we do and the meaning and purpose of work is lost in us, we start to feel dehumanized. And so when we reach out and connect back to people, really inside, and I have been doing conflict resolution for a long time. I have never met any bad people. What I've met is people who lost their way, lost touch of who they are. And so when we talk about inclusive, we're talking about processes that allow people to recognize that they are whole people and that we care about them at work. One of the first things we do when we teach this is we start with wellness conversations. We just use this model, we put it up, and we go in and teach wellness conversations. And people say, wow, I never knew that there were so many parts of me. And I know that, but it's just different. And we get people at work to start thinking. And when we do workshops, with people, especially those in the very male industry, they will say things like, can I take this home for my wife? I want my wife to do this assessment too. And it's very interesting as we see how people are taking their learning and taking it back into their life, because that's what it was meant to be. And I'm writing my seventh book, and it's on well-being intelligence. And it's really the whole curriculum on well-being. Because I believe we should be teaching people how to take care of their lives in all those areas so that they can not just have a good life, they can be great employees, and they can take it back home to their families. Because work is supposed to be the nucleus. Ever since the existence of humans, we go outside to find food, shelter, and clothing to bring back home for our family. We haven't changed. We're still the same DNA strand. We still have that motivation to go out and get good things to bring home to our nest. And that's why we need inclusive wellness at work. We need to remind people that they are whole people. So let me just go through this is a big topic because I've written a couple books on it. But let me just go through it with you, and you can see the diagram is pretty self-explanatory. But at the core of it is interpersonal, which relates to resilience. Now, when I started doing this work, we become very informed. It teaches us every day. We learn from this tool. When we started doing this, people would measure how well they're doing, and they would get a quantifiable number, and they'd be like, okay, so what do we do now? I don't like my number. I want to change it. I want to be well in all of those areas. Of course, as we should be. So we had to now quantify what is wellness, and when are you well enough in those areas, right? And don't forget, we're just looking at 5 or 6 of them, but there are like 20 different elements in all of the areas. And so we started looking and studying. We had large groups of employees we were working with, and we started looking, and then we started to recognize that if you're 5, if you get a score of 5 and below, then you need to do some work. Anything 5 and above, you're okay, you're still coasting, right? But 5 and below, that's when you are in what we call, one is wellness deficit, meaning that you're now taking energy, you're drawing energy away. You know what it is like to be in a deficit, right? There's nothing in the bank. So they're in a wellness deficit, and they're losing energy in that area, and they're now pulling on other areas to keep them well. So it's important to stay well in those areas, meaning that you have 5 and above in those areas. Then we started recognizing this, we started asking, okay, so how do we know we're doing better? How do we know we're getting well and we're improving? And that's when we started looking, well, what are the competencies that align with these well-being dimensions? So we have these dimensions of well-being. What are the competencies that align with them? And that's when we started adding the competencies. So with spiritual wellness, the competency of integrity with self, integrity with who you are, integral to yourself, your passion, your vision, your values, your spirit, and recognizing the importance of spirit at work. When organizations call and say, oh, we have low self-esteem or low morale, well, can you see it? No, you can only feel it. And so it really looks at those elements of who we are that we can't see physically, but we can experience them. And so as we start to build integrity and trust and a sense of knowing and hope, and this morning I heard our keynote speaker was talking about hope. That's one of the things we measure. Hope, hopelessness, right? A sense of who you are. Because we're seeing more and more the challenges in the workplace. My son he's 30 now, and our daughter is 38. So there's like 8.5 years span between our 2 children. When my daughter, I think she's only been to the funeral of one of her colleagues who committed suicide. My son went to a prep school, so he was with all kids from middle class families or urban, and he had gone, by the time he graduated university, he had gone to 5 funerals of his peers who had committed suicide. These are not kids who were neglected or didn't have, well, there's always something happening, but these are kids who had opportunities, but they couldn't see. That hopelessness was there. So we're recognizing that there are challenges that we need to get people connected with their whole self so that they can be more resilient, so they can recognize opportunities. In the social wellness, we look at the different elements in social wellness. We know that in your social aspect of your life, part of that is community, network, it's family, it's friends. And the competency there is responsible communication. And it's to communicate without harm, right? And as a conflict analyst, that is really important. Because a lot of times the communication, especially when we talk about, when we work with leaders and we do a whole relational leadership program with the leaders, because they need to realize that what they say have so much power, can impact people's self-esteem, can impact how employees see themselves, and also will determine the relationship among the employees among each other. I've gone to some departments where it's just toxic, right? Nobody's talking to each other. The silence, you can feel the silence. Right? And I've gone to somewhere people are okay, they're getting along. And leadership has a lot to do with it, because you know what they say, things fall down, right? So when we work with the leaders, we can see the dynamics, the interpersonal relationships change, because the leaders are now able to foster good relationships with their employees and among their peers, their teams, making it more of a psychologically safe workplace for everyone. And we've all talked about and heard of emotional wellness and EQ, but when we look at emotional wellness, we talk about self-mastery. The competency we look at there is understanding that we are not our emotions. I can experience anger, I can experience nervousness, I can experience some form of disillusionment or hurt, but I'm still responsible to be Joyce. I'm still responsible to be myself and to reflect that behavior. And so many times when we see employees, they're struggling because they lost touch with who they are. They're not connected, their self-esteem, their sense of who they are, they don't have that spiritual foundation of who they are, and so they're struggling to manage their emotions. So it's like a domino. When you start having a wellness deficit in one dimension, you start pulling on the others, overcompensating in other areas, and creating a challenging situation in the workplace. And many times those employees tend to be the ones with the most complaints, most harassment complaints, most bullying charges. If they're leaders, in some of the organizations, they have a leadership title, but they got nobody to lead because they have not developed the capacity to work with others. Occupational wellness, we look at career management, we look at leadership, we look at management resources, and we look at engagement. And it's interesting, we've been teaching this model since 2000, early 2000. And when you look at the Gallup research, it talks about the engagement of employees who are well. Employees who experience high well-being are going to be more engaged. And it was very interesting when I saw that. I was like, okay, I guess we're on the right track. Engagement is not something that just magically happens. And how I usually say to clients, I said, just imagine you met someone yesterday and they ask you to marry them tomorrow. Isn't that a little quick, right? Engagement happens after courtship, after we get to know you, after we get to know, trust, and like. That means we have to do something. It's a two-way street. When you hire an employee, you're entering into a contract with them. And it's a two-way contract. For this paycheck and benefits, we expect XYZ work. And when those come together, then we have a harmonious relationship. But when I give you the benefits and the paycheck and you don't show up or you're underperforming, right? And we see a lot of conflict happening around performance time with this, we're looking at people are saying, hey, we're going through these performance review times. We see the nervous leaders, nervous employees. And so that's what we help them to look at, okay, what are you doing to take care? What are you telling yourself? What's the feedback? What are you feeding yourself? And it's important for us to affirm ourselves and affirm each other. That's really important in staying well at work. Having those inclusive, and it was interesting when I saw the keynotes this morning talked about good gossip. It's like, we just call it positive affirmation. Affirm each other. And sometimes we have groups where we just thank you when we're doing small groups. Go and tell somebody in your group how they impact you positively at work. That's important. I have people crying Because I really realized saying good morning at work made people's day so much brighter. And it's important for us to acknowledge those things because they're all part of that energy and engagement in the workplace. Then we go into intellectual wellness, and we know we talk about IQ, but we really are looking at capacity building here. How are we building capacity? I love learning organizations and working with them because there's always continuous learning. And that's important if we want to stay well and we want to get ahead of the curve of the mental health challenges, is that ability to keep learning, to not just your experience, what you experienced in the past, but what are you learning in the future? Because what are you learning about the future? How are you developing yourself? And what's the impact? And how are you now sharing that? And that's that coaching and that's mentoring that's happening in the organization. Looking out for others, very, very important. Helps people to feel safe at work. Then there's environmental wellness, and this is where we look at things like social responsibility, environmental and social governance. We look at things like respect in the workplace, right? The whole idea of environment, but also taking care of our environment. We have that responsibility to do that. And then we go into financial well-being because that is a great area of stress for many employees today. It has always been, but I think we're starting to recognize, and with our financial situation, housing is becoming an issue. People sometimes don't have a good place to live or can't afford a proper place to live. And that might be the challenge at work. So all of those things are part of creating that inclusive wellness. And then when we talk about physical wellness, we look at, with environmental, we look at interdependence. With this financial wellness, we look at innovation, because there's a lot we can do with innovation in learning. It's not just about dollars, it's about resources and time. When we manage our time as well, time is money. And so in physical wellness, we look at vibrancy. Vibrancy is key. The movement, how are we nourishing ourselves? What are we eating? How are we taking care of ourselves? How are we motivated to care for our vessels? And in the study, usually people would say to me, Joyce, what is the most important dimension of wellness? And I was like, I don't know if anyone is so much more important than your spiritual and physical, because they are, but interpersonal as well, because we're social beings. And at the core of the model is the interpersonal. And this is where we have resilience, folks. Because when we're going through challenges, remember we just talked about the family 100 years ago, everybody together? Guess what? When you have a problem, it's not you alone. It's everybody's problem. You're not carrying the weight of it on your own. And so, it's important, and it's one of the pieces that I get a lot of feedback on when we talk about creating resilient relationships. We have to learn. A lot of people don't know how to have relationships because it's not something we teach. We don't teach people how to have healthy relationships. So they don't know how to have relationships because we're not teaching them how to. And sometimes we find ourselves, I find myself feeling like we're an incubator for all the things that people didn't learn that's not showing up at work. Because that's where everything lies. Because we're at work and we're with other people, and the stress sometimes everything comes out. So it's very, very important and very interesting, because when we look at relationship with self and others, heard about the self-critic, we say mean things to ourselves, we say mean things to others too, right? We need to learn how to resolve conflicts, collaborate, how to negotiate, and fun is one of the elements in interpersonal. We need to play too. We need to find our inner child and play and talk. And I do a couples piece that I teach couples at my church, and I do once a month. I teach the couples, and part of that is learning how to have healthier relationships with themselves, but also how to play together. So we have a fun element to it, playing different games, and just recognizing that we can learn about each other to fun things as well. So there are many aspects of it. Right? How much time do I have? I want to go into one other piece, hopefully we have time. When we talk about the interconnected parts of who we are and what we do, it helps us to recognize that we need to thrive and flourish. One of the things I like doing the assessment for when we go into the 9 dimensions is that it helps us to identify the level of risks. That is the first thing employees start saying, well, this is not looking good. I need to change things, right? As we recognize the level of risks, then we can take action to do it. Knowledge is power, knowledge is information, and the more knowledge we have, the better we are. And so one of the things I have done with these competencies is looking at how we can navigate these risks within the organizations. And I've gone ahead and mapped out. And so let's go and look at these other polling questions. Which of these elements do you think is easiest to implement in an inclusive workplace? Spiritual, you can just do the code here. Scan the QR code, can you see? This one is smaller. Which of these do you think is important, is easiest? A spiritual wellness, emotional wellness, or interpersonal wellness? No, I want to ask you some questions. Interpersonal wellness. Okay. So we have interpersonal wellness seems to be pushing up. Spiritual is the next. And I think we've done more meditation and yoga. That's becoming more the trend at work now, right? That I think a lot of us are becoming more open to breath work, that whole spiritual self. But there's a piece that we talk about in terms of spirituality and how it changes the corporate energy. Very, very important. But the interpersonal wellness, and 65% of you believe that it's easier to incorporate interpersonal wellness. Why is that so? There are a number of reasons why, because you have things like harassment policies, right? You have respectful workplace policies, and you can see when people are not behaving well, there is some repercussions to that. And that's the ones we can see. That's why in our wellness work, we identify interpersonal as a significant aspect of people's well-being. Because I could go for my job, drink my ginger latte, come into work, and my boss yells at me, and my whole day is gone, right? All my good intentions of having positive thoughts is gone, and I'm thinking, I hope he gets hit by a bus, right? So it's those it's those things that employees are telling me. It's like, he ruined my life. He ruined my. We have clients who have trying to commit suicide because of what they were experiencing at work. And even though interpersonal is the easiest to implement, a lot of times it is not. And that's why good benefits programs are important and very diverse benefit programs so people can tap into some of their own cultural. And I haven't talked about this piece, but I do feel a responsibility to talk about people of diverse groups. And I'm speaking about people from marginalized groups. Their own source of well-being may be different than the norm, right? And so it's important to look at those inclusive programs that allows them to the ability to incorporate other elements of well-being into their lives so that they can heal from some of the challenges of life and some of the traumas that they experience at work as well. So it's very, very important for us to think about that. I'm going to speed through here and to talk a little bit about the competencies, because one of the things that we've done with the competencies is that we've expanded it. Because a lot of organizations were saying, well, Joyce, we're busy at work and we really want the competencies. And so after some research and pilot projects, and we have actually expanded to 12 competencies. And what you will see here is each dimension of wellness has a competency with it. And so in the spiritual, we have two. We have vision and integrity. Vision, organizations are telling us, are very, very important, because employees without a vision, leaders without a vision, you know what they say, when there is no vision, the people shall perish, right? And so the spiritual and the vision and the spiritual and integrity are the key. And so what we've actually done is we do a 12-month rotation for the competency. So each month they can do competency teaching, and that's what my book is about. My 7th book is on the well-being curriculum. How to implement that within the organization so employees can learn about their wellness, develop, expand their wellness, and be more inclusive, but also to ensure that people are not overwhelmed, because I don't believe that wellness should cause burnout and stress. I think that's just doesn't work, right? Wellness should be easy, it should be fun, it should be light, it should be easily incorporated. And so when we go into organizations and we ask employees, so do you have a wellness program? Those people in the reading club, or those walkers. I have yet to have an employee that says, this is what our wellness program looks like. Or, yes, it's inclusive of everyone, because we know participation in wellness at work has never been top. It's very, very low. And some stats say 20%, right? Some good ones at 37%. So our approach is, let's teach well-being competencies that incorporates everyone, because if you're spending money on wellness at work, everybody should benefit from it. Everyone, no matter where they are, should be able to benefit from the spend on well-being at work and the wellness programs. So the competency teaching actually provides a roadmap to teach people how to develop those dimensions in their life. Because it doesn't matter what you do in the organization, if employees don't take ownership and see the multidimensional aspect of their life and do their part, work is just one element of their life. They have to incorporate this into their own life. They have to connect. We need to have the conversations with them. They need to start recognizing that they are multidimensional in every aspect of their life flows and works together. And that's when we're going to see the key results. And that's when we're going to truly have inclusive wellness, because people are starting, there's ownership on both sides, both the employer and the employee. And people know, employees know, that my employers care about my whole self when I show up at work. And I have a responsibility to honor the contract that I have with them. And so I need to do my part to keep my vessel healthy and well, so that when I show up at work, I can bring my best self to work. We'll go to Samuel.
Joyce, thank you so much. Brian, do we have time for a question, or?
It's 3:30 now, so I think we need to wrap up.
Okay, we're wrapping up. So, thank you, everyone. Thank you to Joyce. That was fantastic. Can't wait to hear more about it. Just a reminder to submit your attendance ticket and your continuing education form. And of course, complete the session evaluation form on the app or through the QR code. We're going to take a 15-minute break, and then please come back to this room. We've got an exciting roundtable activity where we're going to get a chance to talk, so please enjoy your break and come on back.